I want to start this discussion off tonight. We have a lot to talk about. It's been a very long week, and it's also been a very long, 96,000 days of the Trump presidency. I think this is the 13th Thursday, so basically our 13th show since Trump has taken over as the president of the United States of America. And so I do want to, touch on what that's been like, kind of, but not really, because Ben is going to talk about, his failed promises, the scandals, et cetera, tomorrow. So I want to frame this conversation about Trump with this question. When did you start believing that Hillary Clinton was going to win? And how did we all, not we all, right? Because I'm speaking for myself, right? So I guess I didn't fully flesh out that question, but the question basically is, how did the media miss Trump? How did we get to this point where Trump becoming elected was such a big surprise? And I think it's an important question to ask right now, on day 97 or so of his presidency, because if we don't reckon with how we were all surprised by it, then it's likely to happen again, again and again. And so so I'll answer first, and you can all, jump in when you want. I will freely admit that in the beginning, was running, which I guess I'd already known in the back of my head she was going to run. The first thought that came across my head was, she's going to lose. Irrespective of everything else, completely acontextually, not acontextually, but irrespective of any polling, in my head, I thought she lost to a black man in America whose middle name was Hussein. And to be perfectly fair, at the time, President Obama was unqualified for the job, insofar as you could be qualified for the job. Insofar you could be qualified for the United States, which is a very unique job. We could say that he was the first, he had only been senator for a very short amount of time. He was unqualified. But by the time we had got to November, and I don't know when this shift occurred, I had drunk the Kool-Aid. I was like, oh yeah, this is inevitable. Like, she's going to win. I was kind of pissed that I was being told it was inevitable. But I remember not questioning that she was going to win. And I don't know why. I guess the media I just kept hearing it. I kept hearing it from all of the media sources. Everything I was reading was she was going to win, and the only question seemed to be how much she was going to win by. And so I posed that question to you guys, how did you guys see it coming?
Yes.
Yeah.
God. I mean, how to not see it coming, you had to have been willfully ignorant. I didn't expect her to win the primary, to be quite honest, and I don't think she would have had the primaries been fair and honest and open. They did everything they could to prop her up, and that alone was enough to make me think there's no way she's going to win. But just even when she first announced, I had my qualms with Hillary Clinton, because I remembered the super predator comments, because I remembered all the stuff that happened in the 90s when she was first lady. And the fact of the matter is, if you paid attention to politics, or you got into politics anytime after the 90s and you talked about the Clintons, she ran that White House. Like, people say Bill was president. No, Bill was too busy with Monica. That was Hillary's White House. Those were Hillary's policies. That was Hillary having Henry Kissinger over at the White House. That was Hillary doing all these reprehensible things. That was her talking with Barry Goldwater and chopping it up like they were old homies. Nah. So, I mean, realistically, a lot of America remembered this, and a lot of millennials, when we started doing our research and when I started reaching out to other millennials, in particular other black millennials throughout the country, a lot of us were like, nah, we're not going to vote for her. Like, we're not down with this. Not win the presidency as a Democrat if you don't win the black vote, in particular the black Southern vote, and there was no way she was getting it. So from the jump, I thought it was doomed. I just didn't know who she was going to lose to.
I just remember, I thought after her testimony, her 11-hour testimony on Benghazi, which I watched the whole thing, I'm like, wow, that's a strong kind of woman that, she's got a thing. And then afterwards, I started looking into her responses and realized she was lying her face off about some of it, and like bold-faced. And so then I started looking at her responses to questions that were hard. Like when Li Fang first confronted her on the rope line and said, "Will you release your transcripts?" And she ignored it. And like she didn't do a press conference at all for the first 200 and something days. And it was just step after step, she kept making the wrong one. And the one thing that's been consistent throughout every single one of her runs is she's never gone up in the polls. Everywhere she starts, that's always the high point, and then she goes down. And so what I saw her polling against Trump on an individual level, polling against Rubio just disastrously. And I have to say, like, throughout the entire thing, I kept saying she's going to lose, she's going to lose, she's going to lose. And then, like Brandon, towards November, where everyone was saying, like, the individual state polls were showing that she was ahead in the one key contested states, she was going to win. And so I bought it a little bit, and I'm like, well, maybe she will win. And so I don't want to say I was surprised, but, like, everything I had said for a long period of time, for like the entire campaign, was she was going to lose. And then for like a week right before the election, I thought, yeah, you know what? She probably is going to win. And it was all because I bought into the polls.
Okay, so like you guys are better than I am, because I was basing, I feel like I was in an echo chamber in the media I was consuming. Like, so it was, I saw individual polls occasionally. I saw, like, you know, like snippets of data, but largely I was basing my decision off of the consensus narrative that was being built within, you know, not only media like Washington Post and New York Times, but also like what we consider bastions of new media: Daily Kos, Salon, Slate, Daily Beast, you know, everything from, like, yeah, basically everything from the Salon to Jezebel to Everyday Feminism was just pushing this narrative. Well, not only was she going to win, but she was going to win decisively. She had to win, and not had to as though it was entitled to her. There was definitely that specter of entitlement, but that there was just no reasonable way anyone could interpret it as though she was going to lose. And I guess what exemplifies this best for me was the article by Jamel Bowie, and I'm picking on Jamel Bowie because I find him to be funny a lot, where he wrote this very long, detailed article about how the race between Hillary and Trump was essentially a horse race, you know, basically like on a horse track, but Trump had already died in the stables, and she was running by herself. And the only way she could lose was if a comet hit the Earth. And in hindsight, that seems hilarious, but it wasn't just Jamel Bowie. A few weeks before the election, The Intercept was putting it. I'm not talking to The Intercept, obviously. Friends of the show, love them dearly. But no, a few weeks out, even The Intercept tweeted out something that I responded to a little bit negatively, where they said, you know, this race between Hillary and Trump is largely over. Hillary's won. The only reason it's even getting attention is because the media is pretending like it's still a race. So everyone was essentially had essentially decided the race prior to it being determined by votes.
Oh yeah, and
go ahead.
I'm just saying, to back up your claim about The Intercept, I just today was listening to a podcast where Glenn was talking about the media's treatment of the two candidates being disparate. And like they were very much down on Trump, but at the same time, whenever they were focusing on Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, the person he was speaking to was making the claim that they're using innuendo to create a specter of corruption where there wasn't any. But both of them were coming from the point that, oh, yeah, Clinton's got this in the bag. And Glenn kept saying repeatedly, Clinton's more than likely going to win. It will take some sort of catastrophic event for her not to win. So there was pretty much a consensus, like you said.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they're the word for that. Let's learn something with the discourse today. That's called the consensus narrative. That's a sociological thing where it's called the social construction of truth and facts, where basically you hear something enough that it's not fact, it's not proven. It's like there's a lot of room for error in this. And you know, and I know I'm probably gonna get a lot of saying this, but like elections have a big air of randomness to them. They just simply do. A lot of things affect elections that just cannot be determined by polls. And you know, in math, there's just the specter of uncertainty there. But the polling they did itself was in a lot of ways misleading in the way they were determining their variables, specifically basing it on Obama's turnout and a lot of other things. But I don't want to make this conversation about why Clinton lost, because that's a confluence of issues. I really want to make this conversation about, well, how did the media get it so wrong? And there's a really good article in Politico that like sort of touches on this, and what it demonstrates is that there is a bubble in media.